Good evening, everybody. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Rodriguez, would you do the roll call, please? Thank you.
Councilmember Bill De La Pena.
Present.
Councilmember Engler.
Present.
Councilmember Jones is absent. Mayor Pro Tem Adam.
Here.
Mayor McCoy.
Present. All right, so request for continuance of any public hearing or agenda item. I believe, Ms. Noonan, item 14A?
That's correct.
We're going to be pulling the closed session. It's being pulled from the agenda. We don't need to vote on that. Nope. So we'll go to special presentations and announcements, and this is exciting because tonight we're very fortunate to once again have Patrick Cassidy with us, the artistic director of the Thousand Oaks Civic Art Plaza Residential Music Theater Production Company, 5-Star Theatricals. Patrick, I am really interested in knowing who's playing the lead on Matilda and all that stuff, so fill us in. Thank you. Welcome.
So we are so excited about Matilda. I can't tell you. We opened on March 22nd. And Matilda, if you don't know the story, Roald Dahl, incredible book, James and the Giant Peach, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's about this incredibly inspiring young girl who can change lives. And that's what she does. We have hired 2 girls to play Matilda. Olivia Markham is one. Lucy Bollier is another. They will trade off doing performances. The role is that big, it is that demanding, and we have 2 exceptional actresses and singers that are going to play these parts on different nights. We also have, for Matilda, for this community, something very special that 5-Star has never done. The community is so excited about this that 5-Star Theatricals set up an Inspiring Educator Award. In honor of Miss Honey in our show, that's the teacher in our show, Miss Honey, played by this incredible Katie Deshawn, who's going to sing for us. And for people coming to Matilda, we get to recognize a teacher. So students have sent in over 100 letters.
Wow.
I read some of these letters. You can't believe it, what these kids say about their teachers. And we're going to nominate 4 of these teachers. And the letters came in all the way from Los Angeles, Santa Monica, to Porter Ranch, to Ventura. It's a huge thing. I'm so blown away by this. On opening night, we're declaring it Educators Night. And we're going to have discounts for all the educators, and we're going to announce the 4 winners on stage for opening night. It's a huge thing for this show, a huge thing for this community. We also, for this show, set up a book drive. So we are donating, all of our books are going to Casa Pacifica, and the book drop-offs are at 5 locations. You can see them at Brent Deli's. They're beautiful. There's these huge plastic cases that say Matilda on them, and you can put books. And Brent's Deli, Gelson's in both Thousand Oaks and Calabasas, the Hillcrest Center for the Performing Arts, and the Open Book at the mall. And speaking of the TO Mall, on Saturday, on the 9th of March, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, prime time, we are doing a performance of Matilda. The whole cast is going to be there, all the kids. It's not a flash mob, but we are going to get the whole 1 o'clock patrons of the mall excited about Matilda. This show has been an incredible thing for this community already. We see it at 5-Star. I am so honored to be a part of it. And at that performance, it's going to be represented by Gelson's too. We have a thing called Entitled Give Back Day, which 5-Star Theatricals is going to give out bookmarks and flyers on that day. That's everything that we're doing for Matilda. So without further ado, thank you for listening to me.
I have to ask you a question.
Please.
Is Matilda telekinetic? I mean, she's supposed to have telekinesis. So did you check that out with the book and make sure that...
She, let's put it this way. She can move all of this assembly stuff. She can move it down and put it under there, and actually a stage can come up.
She's hired.
So here is our cast. I want to introduce them. I won't introduce them all, but I am going to introduce you to some of them. This is an incredibly inspiring cast in an inspiring show. As I said, we have 2 Matildas, and if you, Olivia, and if you, Lucy, could just step out and show yourselves. This is Olivia Markham in the blue, and Lucy Bollier. They are incredible, incredible performers. This is the rest of our cast from Matilda. We have Katie Deshawn. Is she here yet? Is Katie there? Oh, there's Katie. Katie Deshawn plays Miss Honey, the one retired for the Inspiring Teacher Educator Award. And then we have an incredible musical director. She is joining us for the first time, Miss Jennifer Lynn on the piano. Woo-hoo. The rest, you guys will be awed by. Ladies and gentlemen, the cast of Matilda.
Take it away, guys. Bless you.
When I grow up, I will be tall enough to reach the branches that I need to reach to climb the trees you get to climb when you're grown up. And when I grow up, I will be smart enough to answer all the questions that you need to know the answers to before you're grown up. And when I grow up, I will eat sweets every day on the way to work, and I will go to bed late every night. And I will wake up when the sun comes up, and I will watch cartoons until my eyes go square. And I won't care, 'cause I'll be all grown up when I grow up. When I grow up, when I grow up, when I grow up, I will be strong enough to carry all the heavy things you have to haul around with you when you're a grown up. And when I grow up, when I grow up, when I grow up, I will be brave enough to fight the creatures that you have to fight beneath the bed each night to be a grown up. And when I grow up, I will have treats every day, and I'll play with things that moms pretend that moms don't think are fun. And I will wake up when the sun comes up, and I will spend all day just lying in the sun. And I won't bend, 'cause I'll be all grown up when I grow up.
When I grow up, I will be brave enough to fight the creatures that you have to fight beneath the bed each night to be a grown up. When I grow
Just because you find that life's not fair, it doesn't mean that you just have to grin and bear it. If you always take it on the chin and wear it, nothing will change.
when I grow
Just because I find myself in this story doesn't mean that everything is written for me. If I think the ending is fixed already, I might as well be saying I think that it's okay. And that's not right. And if it's not right, you have to put it right. But nobody else is gonna put it right for me. Nobody but me is gonna change my story. Sometimes you have to be a little bit naughty.
Mayor McCoy, thank you. That is our cast of Matilda. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Mayor McCoy, before I leave, I just wanted to tell you, we open March 22nd and we close March 31st. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here. Much appreciated.
And thank you.
Oh,
We're
it's my
really
pleasure.
excited as a city, and thank you for all you do. All right. Thanks, Lewis. Thanks, families, for coming out. All right, that brings us to item number 6, public comments. Ms. Rodriguez, will you set it up?
This is a time and place for public comments. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding items on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction. All remarks should be addressed to the council as a whole, and all documents for the City Council and official records should be presented to the city clerk prior to speaking. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record. Under state law, public comment matters may not be considered by the council unless listed on the agenda, but may be referred to the city manager for administrative follow-up. 4 individuals have presented cards, and pursuant to council standards, speakers are allowed 3 minutes, and the yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you very much. And for all the folks speaking tonight, we're grateful you come out to share with us. Our first speaker tonight will be Donna Mortimer. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mayor McCoy, council members. My name is Donna Mortimer, and I'm a commissioner on the Thousand Oaks Council on Aging. I wanted to share some information on some of our upcoming events. Each year, the Council on Aging hosts the Senior of the Year Awards ceremony and social to recognize some of our more than 1,200 seniors who tirelessly give back to our community. This year, the ceremony will be Thursday, June 13th at the Goebel Adult Community Center. The nomination period for this event is currently open, but closes on April 1st. So I'd like to encourage anyone listening or watching that knows of an outstanding senior volunteer to go to toaks.org/seniors and fill out a nomination form. It's a wonderful event, and we can never do enough to thank our community volunteers. And lastly, the Council on Aging holds a televised meeting the first Wednesday of every month here at the Civic Arts Plaza in the boardroom. We have terrific speakers each month, and all are welcome to join us live, watch the broadcast live, or on replay on TOTV, or to watch online at toaks.org. Our next meeting is tomorrow, Wednesday, March 6th at 1 p.m. Our speaker will be Dr. Diana Sarkissian, a nutritionist from UCLA Health. She will be speaking on vitamins and supplements for seniors, facts and myths, and I encourage everyone to come join us for this talk. I want to thank the council for giving me this time, and I look forward to seeing many of you at our Senior of the Year event. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Our next speaker is Ray Mclane. Good evening, sir. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you. My name, does this work?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. My name is Ray Mclane. I'm a retired businessman. I live in Westlake Village for the last 40 years. I've been self-employed most of my life. I'm an electronic engineer. I've started software and hardware manufacturing companies here. I've also been a builder-developer. I built a custom home on the island, Westlake Island, apartment buildings, custom condominium projects, mobile home parks, even a small hotel in Venice, and about 50 single-family homes. I am retired, but I came here today to speak about the homeless problem in our community, and I have a solution for it. Okay. There are 20 to 200 homeless in Thousand Oaks, which was reported by Tara Cruz at the October 23rd City Council meeting. In Los Angeles, we actually have 57,000 homeless. Most of those people, what people don't know is that about 15,000 of them are children, 9,000 of them are first-time homeless, and many of those are senior citizens trying to live on the average Social Security check of $1,400 a month. So I don't know about you, but many of my retiring friends are all moving out of state because they can't afford to stay here after they retire. So I've come up with a plan to solve the homeless problem and provide ultra-low-cost housing for seniors. In order to have ultra-low-cost housing, we need to minimize the cost. The main costs are the land costs, the construction cost, and the interest during the construction. In order to minimize the land costs, I'm asking the City Council to consider leasing some of the city land to a nonprofit I have just formed called 3dprintedhomesforthehomeless.org. In my research, I found that the City of Los Angeles and other municipalities have leased property for $1 a year to nonprofits. So I'm asking you to consider leasing some of the city land for $1 a year to build ultra-low-cost housing and free housing for the homeless. In order to minimize the costs, we plan on using a new technology of 3D concrete printers. One of the printers can build 2 to 4 units in a day with a crew of 3 people. By using multiple printers, we can print an entire project in 30 days, which saves most of the interest cost. The building would be all concrete, no wood used in the construction. So the building would be a green building, and it would not burn in a fire like we just had, and it would survive an 8 Richter scale earthquake. The best part is the cost estimate to build this would be $65 to $80 a square foot. Now, nationally, it costs $125 to build a square foot. But in high-cost areas like Los Angeles and California, it's running $200 to $500 a foot. So in summary, what I'm asking you to lease to the nonprofit some city land. With the lease in hand, I can obtain 100% construction financing. No government money would be needed, and some of the units would be leased at a very below market rate to seniors, and others would be free to the homeless.
Mr. Mclane, the time has expired, but at the conclusion of this, our city manager will get all the information. You've done a great presentation to allow us to be intrigued with it, but we would need to hear more of that. So if he'll arrange at the end of the public comments to get more information, have somebody meet with you, if that'd be okay?
That's exactly my last sentence. Could you appoint somebody that I could talk to go
we'll
in
take
greater
care of
detail?
that. Good. Well, thank you. We're on the same wavelength. Thank you, Ms. McLean. Yagnesh Prajapati, did I say that right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome, friend. Thanks for coming tonight.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, my name is Yagnesh Prajapati. I'm from Ventura, and I'm here.
Would you speak into the mic for us? We're older and hard of hearing.
I'm here this evening to extend an invitation from Ventura Regional Sanitation District's General Manager, Chris Tyson. This invitation is to all City of Thousand Oaks council members, staff, and community members. VRSD would like for you all to join us in a walk to build a Ronald McDonald room in Ventura County Hospital. The Ronald McDonald room will provide housing facilities, sleeping, laundry, kitchen, etc., free of charge to families whose children are receiving care at the Ventura County Hospital. VRSD, as a leader in public service in the county, would love to see the unification of all public service entities for this great cause. The Walk for Kids is Sunday. Sorry, really nervous.
That's all right. You're doing great.
The Walk for Kids is on Sunday, April 7, with festivities starting at 7 a.m. at San Buenaventure State Beach, located at 701 San Pedro Street in Ventura. I've given information cards and a poster to the clerk, we look forward to seeing a team representing your city on Sunday, April 7. And if your agency leads in event donations, we'll be visiting you to deliver the Leading with a Heart Award. And thank you for your time.
You did a great job, and this is a great organization, and thanks for the flyers and all the information in relation to it. So thanks, man.
For sure. And if you guys need to contact me, my phone number is 805-658-4669 during regular business hours, which is 7:30 to 5.
Okay, we'll call you at 6. No, I'm just kidding. Hey,
if I'm there, I'll pick up.
All right, thanks, man. Our final speaker tonight, Kyle Rohrbach. Good evening, sir. Thanks for coming down.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, staff, Thousand Oaks. I'm Kyle. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks, and I'm here tonight to ask you to kindly reconsider the way in which planning commissioners are appointed. After this last go-around, it became clear to me that the current process is flawed or imperfect. Namely, I think there is no established requirement that each council member has reviewed prospective commissioner applications. Ostensibly, this is an issue that can lead to scenarios like at the last council meeting. But beyond that, I think it also lends strong favorability towards incumbency and personal connections. In full disclosure, I was an applicant this last go-around, and yet I only heard from one council member who called simply to say that while my application was great, they would only be considering incumbents. So I've spoken here before, and you may know, but I'll just repeat. I am a product of Conejo Valley, the school district. I was a former youth commissioner. I volunteer year-round for the Y. I'm a grateful recipient of a couple of leadership awards from local community groups. I own a house here, conduct and own my own business here, and I pay my taxes on time. But I think perhaps most significantly is because I've lived here my whole life, I think that it at least provides an interesting perspective as to how someone like me sees the city. Because I remember what it was like in the early 90s and the mid 90s and where we are now. And I'm really proud of where we are now. And truthfully, I'm not here to throw a pity party or, and certainly without being privy to who the other applicants are, I couldn't tell you if I rightfully deserve a spot on the Planning Commission. But I do believe that at minimum, something like a phone call would have at least given me a chance to make a case as to why someone with my background could bring a unique and different perspective to the Planning Commission. So while I'm disappointed that I won't get to work with all of you, I'm more concerned about the process, specifically that it seems that there isn't much of one in place. And so I'm not one for complaining without providing solutions, so I'll wrap up by just giving you a take of what I would like for you to consider. Since you are all elected at large, in my opinion, I think that the Planning Commission should represent your voices as a collective. So considering there aren't hundreds of applicants every time around, even if they aren't long, I might consider holding interviews with the applicants as a panel, as a group, where you could talk to each other about the prospective candidates and get feedback and ask questions and make that decision more as a unit rather than as individuals, even if you still appoint as individuals. So in sum, I just wanted to say thank you for the time and at least the opportunity, and I think that at least considering making a change would go a long way to showing the people that put themselves out there that you care about how you select what is arguably one of the city's most important commissions. Thank you.
Kyle, real quick, just thank you for the insights. Thank you for sharing with us from your perspective the process. And all of your suggestions are suggestions we will consider. So thank you for doing that.
Thanks.
And
I
thank you
appreciate
for
it.
your willingness to volunteer.
Of course. Thanks.
All right, man. Well, that concludes our public comments. Do you want any follow-up? Mr. Powers?
Mayor McCoy, thanks so much. As it relates to Council on Aging and the walk for the Ronald McDonald House, we'll certainly do our part to try to share information on both of those, Senior of the Year event and the Walk for Kids event coming up on April the 7th. I saw that Deputy Director of Community Development Kelvin Parker went out into the hall to pass on information to the gentleman that had
Mr. Mclane.
brought up the homeless issue, and we will certainly follow up with him directly. And as it relates to Planning Commission, as Mayor stated, we'll certainly take those recommendations into heart. What I'd also like to remind everyone that's out there that's interested in being involved, there are other ways to be involved as well, whether it ranges from our Community Funding Review Committee to other committees and commissions, and there's certainly going to be a role during our Comprehensive General Plan update. So for those that are interested in serving, we will certainly have opportunities for you to serve, and I would encourage you to stay involved.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Item number 7, the consent calendar. We've had a chance to review it. Do we have a motion to approve? Councilmember Engler?
Yeah, I move that we carry the consent calendar forward.
Ms. Rodriguez?
The motion carries 4-0 with Councilmember Jones absent.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Item 8, there's no public hearing tonight, but we do have department reports. Item number 9, we're going to begin. There's actually 4 department reports. We'll start with Mark Town, Community Development Director. Resolution to expedite permit processing and waive certain fees for properties damaged during Hill and Woosley fire. So take it away.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As you just described, the purpose of tonight's item is to consider 2 things, basically. Permitting process for property owners that were affected by the Hill and Woolsey fires, and also to consider waiver of certain fees associated with the rebuilding process. So in terms of background, the Hill and Woolsey fires began on November 8th last year. By the time it was all said and done, the Hill fire had burned over 4,000 acres and the Woolsey fire almost 100,000 acres. In our planning area of Thousand Oaks, there were approximately 5,700 acres that were affected. And as I think everybody here knows, at one point during the fires, about 2/3 of the city was evacuated. This image shows the perimeters, the boundaries of the 2 fires. Hill fire out on the west side of the city. As you can see, this is the city and planning area boundary. This is basically the top of the Camarillo grade, Conejo grade. So you can see the Hill fire burned basically in the western portion of the city. Woolsey fire, looking here to the upper right portion of this image, denotes the northeastern portion of the city, and you can see how it affected a number of our open space areas and nearby communities throughout the North Ranch and nearby areas. In terms of damage, the final count was that 38 structures were destroyed. Most of those were residential buildings, only a couple of commercial buildings. 12 other properties had varying levels of fire damage, but they remained inhabitable going forward. At this point in time, all of the properties have been inspected in terms of debris removal, and debris removal itself has either been completed or is almost complete on 9 of those affected properties. In terms of the recovery program, the city has taken a number of steps to try to assist victims of these fires. One of the most important is to identify a city staff contact person for the recovery program as an available point of contact for all of the affected property owners. And actually, she is seated to my left, Ms. Farnoosh Levers, an engineer and our primary point of contact for all of the property owners and she has made contact and has spoken with all of them at this time. After the fire, I think most of you are aware that a local assistance center was set up at the Grant Brimhall Library. City of Thousand Oaks staff were there, as well as a whole host of other staff from federal agencies, state agencies, County of Ventura, Red Cross, and many others. A very effective, I thought, and successful operation. We, of course, had a town hall meeting here the evening of November 14th, which was very well attended by residents affected by the fires. And then at the end of November, on the 27th, you approved a number of actions that were part of a fire recovery plan, including $300,000 for contract staff to assist with plan review. When we get to that stage, we haven't spent any of that money yet because we're still comparatively early in the process. And then also $250,000 for debris removal and other site mitigation. So what staff would like to propose tonight, it really consists and boils down to just a few things. One, we would like your authority to expedite the plan review for these affected property owners. For home rebuilds that are staff level decisions, we can process those in 4 to 6 weeks instead of the typical 7 to 9. And for cases that would go to the Planning Commission, we can do those in 4 to 5 months instead of 4 to 6 months. We can't shave any time off the front side of that time frame because of required public notice requirements per our municipal code. In terms of building plan check, the current standard for first, second, and third plan checks are 4, 3, and 1 week durations. We can process those in 3, 2, and 1 week time frames, respectively. Staff is also suggesting that you consider the waiver of certain planning and building, public works fees. In terms of the planning fees, they're listed here, and basically what these are the application fees for the rebuilding of a home. So for any property owner, only one of these options would apply depending on the type of rebuild, whether it's literally type for type, or whether the property owner would like to propose an addition, some kind of change in the footprint of the building, and also these permit types are a function of the underlying zoning. So these are not cumulative. A property owner would be subject to only one of these fees, depending on the extent of their rebuild. So that's normal exposure to these fees. We're suggesting that City Council consider waiving these fees going forward. Now, we don't know exactly how many will choose to rebuild like for like versus any kind of an expansion, so it's hard to know right now the fiscal impact of this, but we will be monitoring that and reporting back to you as we go forward. Then there are a few comparatively minor public works fees that may be applicable to different properties. Public works staff is recommending that we waive these as well. In terms of the proposed process, we're also changing that, and that's part of how we can save time. One of which, of course, I mentioned is having contract staff available. Another is to actually assign the planner and the plan checker prior to the submittal of the plans. Normally we do that after. Now we're suggesting to do that prior in concert with Ms. Levers. And then we would have a pre-submittal meeting with the applicant. That's the second step in this graphic. Then the planning review, plan check, and building permit is the fifth step. So it's also a condensed process and a different process for these affected property owners. And with that, staff is recommending that you consider adoption of the resolution attached in your staff report to establish expedited processing procedures and also to waive the fees that I just outlined for property owners affected by the Hill and Woolsey fires. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions, and Ms. Levers is here available as well. Thank you.
And I didn't recognize you earlier, but thank you for coming out tonight and all the work you've been doing. Council, you have questions for the panel? Councilmember Engler?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. On the expedited planning review, you mentioned the two time frames, the one staff level time frame and then the planning commission time frame. Can you explain a little bit more about which would qualify for staff, which would qualify for planning commission? Is it if you remain in the same footprint, or is there other qualifiers?
Right, so it's a function of the size of the rebuild. It's a function of whether it's first floor or first and second floor components. For instance, if somebody wanted to add a second floor to the design, then that could trigger planning commission review. If one wants to expand the footprint of the building, for instance, more than 150% of the previous footprint, then that would trigger planning commission review as well. Like for like rebuilds, that would be essentially building permits only. So that would be the fastest. But what we've heard from other cities and the County of Ventura, City of Ventura, that have been through this process, in that case with the Thomas Fire, most property owners choose to rebuild their home in a slightly different design. Maybe larger, maybe situated differently, maybe an additional bedroom. It really depends, but comparatively few, at least in that experience, rebuilt exactly as the home was originally constructed. So there are triggers for planning commission versus staff review. Fundamental principle is that designs that have the potential to either affect an area or trigger neighbor interest, let's put it that way, those typically rise to the planning commission level, and others are processed by staff. Now, having said that, there is an intermediate step where if a neighbor is concerned about a pending staff level decision, then we hold what we call an administrative hearing, and that's free for that party and enables us to basically resolve any kind of potential concerns in a more informal setting.
But in either case, you're looking at trying to expedite any of these processes?
So I think it is important to note that we are not changing the process if it would normally require staff review or planning commission review. That would still occur. We're taking steps to make the process faster, but we're not cutting out those steps. If a project would normally be reviewed by the planning commission and a proposed home design would trigger the same review level, then we will be having that planning commission review. We're not cutting out any of the steps per se. We're adding some additional work on the front end in coordination with Ms. Levers, and basically allocating staff specifically to this task to process these rebuilds. So essentially we're talking about 38 custom homes or portions thereof.
Councilman Bradham.
Thank you, Mayor. For Ms. Liebers, hi. So we lost 36 homes, 2 commercial buildings, and 12 properties were damaged. And you're the point person that people go to work with the city to get these properties rebuilt. How has that been going? Have most of the owners come forward at this point to work with us?
I've made contact with all the homeowners, and all but 11 have actually submitted to one program or the other. And by 11, I mean there's actually some more. It's more of the 50 number that I'm talking about. 11 are left to sign up, and out of the 38, there's 3 remaining. And they're in contact with me, and they're responsive. So all of the 38 are really working towards getting an application in.
So that's good. So everybody's aware of the resources that we offer, and everybody's on track to get rebuilt.
You got it.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
And if I may, Mayor McCoy, just to add on to that, the service that we're being able to provide through the Public Works Department, putting Farnoosh forward to help support us in this role. This was really one of those lessons learned from our neighbors to the north that went through the Thomas Fire. And one of the biggest challenges that folks face is, where do I go to get my question answered? And there can be a whole myriad of different places to go. And so by having FAR at the table, they're able to call direct, and whether she knows the answer off the top of her head or not, she's able to track down that answer and respond to the person directly. And that's a service that we're pleased to be able to provide, and we hope it's going to help make the process, a painful process, as quick and yet still thorough as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Councilmember Bill de la Pena.
Thank you, Mayor McCoy. My question is, did the mobile home owners in Vallecito get the help that they needed eventually?
Well, when it came to the financial side, is that the reference? When it came to that, I was able to work with some of our staff members to get them answers from FEMA and SBA and 211. I'm also sitting on phone calls once a week with, actually I think it's once every other week, with Ventura County Long-Term Recovery Group. So the immediate needs have been taken care of, the immediate financial aid, but the long-term recovery aid is being worked on in the background, and I will, once they get an answer on when that might be rolling out, I'll get that out to the people in need over there.
But FEMA is now on the same page with them?
Yes,
Thank you.
we provided links to FEMA spreadsheets and phone numbers, and the message is now more clear that people can appeal the process, and it's not just a full rejection if they get an initial denial letter.
But these denials were due to clerical issues that FEMA had.
Some of it was due to that, but a lot more of it was just due to the fact that you have to wait till your insurance runs out before you can apply.
Okay.
And they make you wait, I think it's 21 days before your insurance funds runs out. And for that specific, there's one specific person I've been working with at the mobile home park. They've been able to work it out, and they're within a week of, I think, reapplying to FEMA. So it's cleared up.
Thank you.
That aspect.
Any other questions from the council? There's no public speakers. Any other discussion or motion to approve the recommendation? Councilmember Adam?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think it's, pardon me, a great credit to the city that we've spent the money that we have to add staff to the Community Development Department to get these permits processed, and we spent some money on debris removal program, and we want to see these homes rebuilt. And I want to thank Ms. Liebers and Mark Town and his department for making this process as painless as possible, even though that's almost impossible when you're trying to rebuild your home. But we're here to help, and with that, I'd like to move the resolution to expedite the planning process and to waive certain fees to make that happen.
We have the motion, but Councilmember Bill de la Pena, did you want to say something?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Engler?
Yes, I just want to chime along with Councilman Adam that what we've done in this town should be a model for other towns, and my hat is off to you, having done quite a bit of work in this area in the past. What we've done here at the city is very good, and I'm happy to support any efforts to make it a little bit easier for the people who were the unfortunate victims of this fire.
You guys are doing a great job putting it back together piece by piece. Thank you. Ms. Rodriguez, will you put together the vote?
The motion carries 4-0 with Councilmember Jones absent.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. That takes us to item 9B. We have Nader Haidari, Engineer Division Manager, and Jay Spurgeon, Public Works Director. They're going to be covering the Thousand Oaks Boulevard Wastewater Main Extension. Take it away, fellas.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Nader Haidari, Engineering Division Manager. I'm here to provide a department report on the status of the Thousand Oaks Boulevard Wastewater Main Extension project. Just some background on the project. There is currently no traditional wastewater service for the parcels south of the Ventura County Watershed Protection District box along Thousand Oaks Boulevard between Herbs Road and Caneo School Road. That's due to the size of the Ventura County Watershed Protection District box that prevents being crossed. The lack of gravity sewer service is a hindrance to current and future development in the area. So in response to that need, a detailed wastewater analysis was performed in 2018 to engineer a new wastewater main that would be extended along this and dance along the south side of the box. That would also be factored in based on the Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan and all future development for the sizing. The project is being constructed in two primary phases. Phase 1 was advanced so that it could be constructed in conjunction with the other utility and site work on the Lupe's site redevelopment, since it passes through their parcel. This is an exhibit that shows the picture here. The county storm drain box is shown in blue that runs parallel to Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and the Phase 1 portion of the wastewater extension is in green on the upper left. Phase 2 expansion is shown in purple, going from Zuniga Ridge all the way down to the lakes. A reimbursement agreement was executed with GL Development in October 2018 to construct the Phase 1 wastewater improvements, and there's been one amendment to date, which was authorized by the City Council in December. So I'd like to highlight the project benefits. The creation of a new gravity wastewater main would help all parcels south of the county box on Thousand Oaks Boulevard. This provides important environmental and operational benefits to those parcels. That includes 1690 Thousand Oaks Boulevard, the Lupe's redevelopment site, the west side parcel, all of the properties along Zuniga Ridge, the Civic Arts Plaza, and the lakes. Putting in these underground utilities early, including constructing of this wastewater main, will help avoid the need to trench Thousand Oaks Boulevard repeatedly in the future on a one-off basis as properties get developed. This wastewater line is being done in concert with the larger streetscape improvements as well for the downtown core, which is going to launch with improvements to the Western Gateway, the intersection between Erbs Road and Zuniga Ridge, as shown here in this concept from 2018. We are installing and upgrading all of the underground infrastructure first, and then to be followed by the surface improvements. This is the same idea behind the Thousand Oaks Boulevard streetscape waterline amendment that was on the consent calendar tonight. So here's a closer view of the layout of the first phase of the new 12-inch wastewater line that's being constructed. As you can see, this ties into the western gateway of the boulevard. The county storm drain box is shown in yellow on this sketch. You're likely familiar with it since this alignment is going to be the future Paseo that's being envisioned to go through the downtown core. You can see that our wastewater line generally is parallel to the box. However, it does jog a bit. That was done in order to avoid a few oak trees, as well as still work with the Lupe site redevelopment plan. So this first phase that is underway has two main sections. The one piece that we started on was in Thousand Oaks Boulevard. That's roughly 1/3 of the length of this pipeline. This is where we started the project. It's about 200 feet long with 2 access holes. This section has already been completed. The next section, which is the remaining 2/3 of the project, is located mostly within easements going through the parcels and that are being developed. We are currently at the yellow mark there, which is just about at the halfway mark at the eastern edge of 1690 Thousand Oaks Boulevard, about to enter into the Lupe site. So the project had several unique challenges that were anticipated and planned for, such as the extremely deep placement in order to allow for sufficient slope to carry it all the way back to Caneo School Road, the complex alignment associated with a diagonal street crossing, easements and jogging to avoid street trees, the need for several weeks of night work, complex lane closures due to intersection impacts, and some controllable amount of groundwater at the bottom of the trench was anticipated. While all of those planned challenges did present themselves, we've also had several unanticipated challenges that also presented themselves since the very outset of the project. The borderline incident and the subsequent fires in November both occurred during the first week of construction and required us to shut down the project for several days. We've also had just about 4 weeks of shutdown due to the unusually heavy rainy season. In addition, and of greater impact to the cost and schedule of the project, has been several unforeseen site conditions that we've encountered over the past few months. I'll highlight a couple of these in detail for you. The first major differing site condition that we've encountered since the beginning of the project was the presence of a large section of extremely hard Conejo blue volcanic rock, which was located in the trench zone under Thousand Oaks Boulevard. This required a substantial amount of additional labor and equipment to grind and excavate through, including the use of 2 large specialty rock grinders to beat away at the rock. This additional excavation work extended the project schedule for over 7 weeks in order to excavate rock in depths of up to 11 foot in thickness, finally concluding on January 3rd. The soils report that was used in the design of the pipeline did not show this vein of blue rock in the street. We've also had substantial added cost and delays due to the high groundwater in our excavation zone. We anticipated some groundwater at the bottom of our trenches, as I indicated earlier, given how deep they are, and we had allocated for that in the project bid. However, as a result of the unusually wet winter, we've experienced significantly greater groundwater levels within our trenching operations with constant inflow. This has required additional labor, equipment, and materials on a near daily basis for the past 2 months to mitigate. The wet winter and high levels of groundwater have also exacerbated some pre-existing conditions containing poor backfill of previous utility installations in our trench zone. This has presented a substantial amount of uncompacted fill and large pockets of sand underground, which have complicated the installation. Many of our excavations have been impaired by these factors and have required additional work to restabilize the trenches. We've also encountered a handful of unexpected unmarked utilities, including gas, water, communication, as well as abandoned septic tanks underground. This is relatively minor compared to the other factors at play. However, it has been a contributing factor toward the cost and schedule impacts. Here's a tabulation of the monthly added costs that have been incurred to date, along with the primary factors that have generated the cost each month. You can see the extra cost peaked in December, primarily due to the costly specialized rock grinders that were utilized, and that has been, however, decreasing since then. Here's the overall project cost showing the First Amendment and the current request for additional budget. It's important to note that the reimbursement against these costs will occur over time as properties connect to this new 12-inch wastewater line. The current forecasted cost to complete the project is $1.1 million. Despite these numerous challenges and the ongoing wet weather we're continuing to face week after week, things are progressing forward. The project is now nearly 50% complete. All the work in Thousand Oaks Boulevard, including both utility access holes, have been completed. Following the completion of the wastewater line, the remaining streetscape improvements in the Herbs Los Feliz Zuniga intersection are on track to be completed in coordination with the Lupe site redevelopment. Just to conclude, this is an important infrastructure investment for Thousand Oaks Boulevard and the downtown core. Wastewater is a critical service that will benefit numerous parcels that are located south of the county storm drain box. The recommendations are in the staff report, and staff is available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nader. Though we welcome the rain, this has been a challenge for you. Good work. Council, you have questions? We'll begin with Councilmember Bodilla La Peña.
Thank you, Mayor McCoy. Good evening. I have a couple of questions. You mentioned there were veins of blue rock that were not detected during the soil studies. How good does a soil study have to be in order to detect these veins?
So primarily it's a function of how, and I guess that's our weather again. Primarily it's a function of how many borings you do and whether you're fortunate to have those borings be completed in the area that is more problematic versus, less problematic. So it's kind of just it's a function of that. And so the use of the soils report on site was utilized since we're going through the site for the most part. And that level of rock, although it does exist on the backside of the site, wasn't picked up on the underground condition. And so far it was only encountered in the street.
How can we ensure that the soil studies are done more thoroughly? Obviously, the bigger the study, the more encompassing the study, the more expensive. However, how would you weigh in a more expensive, more thorough soil study versus now looking at a project that has now doubled in cost?
Yeah, so although additional soils report early would have been more beneficial and would have revealed some of these conditions, however, those conditions would have been factored in by the bidders into their costs, and we would likely be looking at very similar costs.
Okay, and the groundwater, same question, or how can we, obviously we've had a lot of rain and the groundwater level will rise. how could that have been anticipated? It was higher than usual.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of a wetter winter than usual. The groundwater and many sites, if there wasn't a coordination item going on or a schedule constraint, many sites would have just kind of packed up and resumed work, in the summer or let things dry out. That is one option that is utilized occasionally on projects that have deep trenches like we do. But given the fact that the project's on a critical path and we're coordinating with the development of the Lupe's parcel and not wanting to delay that project, we have to continue forward.
This infrastructure is happening because of anticipated development south of the Thousand Oaks Boulevard. What is the anticipated growth in terms of commercial and residential that this infrastructure improvement will serve?
So all of the planning studies and the downtown specific plan and other elements were factored in, and the highest level of zoning that could potentially happen was factored in. So this line is upsized and will not have any considerations with capacity issues in the future.
Regardless of how much development will happen, it will meet all of those demands.
That is correct.
Okay. And lastly, authorize city manager to execute future amendments to reimbursement agreement. Given that we're now, again, looking at double the cost, when would we come back to council if there were another large expenditure?
So those amendments that are being requested to be executed by the city manager are up to the dollar amount that's being proposed. So anything that would go beyond that 1.1 million would have to return to council.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? All right, and there's no public speakers, so do we have a motion? Councilmember Adam?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Well, it looks like you hit just about everything you can hit except archaeological artifacts. Yeah, knock on wood. I know. Anyway, putting in a sewer line isn't the most scintillating of projects. However, as you stated in this report, it's really a prelude to the creation of our downtown core master plan. It's a prelude to widening our sidewalks, making the downtown more people-friendly, creating a place, a destination. And although this is something that's, like I said, not exactly exciting in that sense, what it will lead to will be. And just like on the consent calendar, we had an item where looks like we're going to upgrade some of the water mains, and all this infrastructure stuff has to take place before we can get to the creation of the downtown core master plan, which we've been working on for a number of years. So thanks for keeping at it. I know it's been a tough job, and I will move that we grant the extra funds to get this job done.
Move staff recommendation.
Staff recommendation 9B.
Ms. Rodriguez?
The motion carries 4-0 with Councilmember Jones absent.
Thank you, Notter. That brings us to item 9C. Again, Mark Town, Community Development Director. General Plan Housing Element Annual Progress Report. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. Again, this is an annual report that is required of all cities and counties in California, that each entity report back to the state with regard to how we're doing on implementing our general plan and how we're doing on generating housing, and especially housing in different income categories. This report has to be provided to the state by April 1st, so we're coming right up on that time frame. And it basically is composed of three parts. It has, as I mentioned, general plan, progress report, housing element, annual progress report, and then the status report on the housing successor agency. So in terms of the general plan progress report, the staff report does describe specific actions that were taken with regard to each of the elements in the general plan, particularly in the context of changes or significant implementation activities. So in this image, you have 4 bullet points which identify and describe, I won't go through all of this, but describe general plan amendments which City Council voted on last year. For instance, the first one was for the assisted living facility on Duesenberg Drive, change in land use designation from industrial to institutional, and et cetera, with the other general plan amendments. So we do report back on such changes to the state every year. We also address other elements of the general plan, in this case circulation. We describe in our report projects that are both in the design and the planning phase. And in this particular report, we describe 6 public works projects, such as the sidewalk and street improvements on Caneo School Road, and then winding around to Willow Lane in terms of sidewalk and other improvements. And then construction projects are described, for instance, the Westlake Boulevard sidewalk and ADA curb ramp cuts citywide, which impressively are over 300. We also describe the overall growth rate in terms of housing production. And so now, as we're in the middle of well, a little bit beyond middle actually, the 5th year of this 8-year cycle for our current housing element, so far in this period, the last 5 years, 410 building permits have been issued for 410 homes, averaging 82 units per year on average over the past 5 years. So it's been a very modest growth rate, a total of a little bit over 80 each year. Now, again, the state is very interested in seeing how we're doing on meeting our RHNA numbers, the regional housing needs allocation. So this image shows the progress that we made in the last year, and you can see it's broken out into these 4 income categories. You can see last year we issued 3 permits for units in the very low income category, none in the low category, 47 in the moderate, and 32 in the above moderate categories, for a total of 82, which just happens to be similar to the average over the past 5 years, just pure coincidence. These very low units, for instance, just as a very practical sort of nexus, these are the very low units that were included in the apartment building that is currently under construction on Caneo School Road. So now if we take a look back at the past 5 years of reports to the state, same type of income categories. If we look at this column right here, start here and then move from left to right, you can see that the state gave us a target of 84 very low income units, 58 low income units, 36 moderate, and 77 above moderate. That's the target picture that we were given by SCAG through their analysis of regional housing growth needs. And so it totaled to 255. And that number is a combination, by the way, of units that were given to us, 192 in this current cycle, and we had a carryover of 63 units from the past cycle because we hadn't met those, totaling 255, our new RHNA allocation. So now if we look back 5 years, we can get a sense of how we're doing on these different income categories. And if we just start at the top, moving left to right, again, 84 was our target. To date, we've issued permits for 20 in that very low income category. We have a remaining balance of 64. And likewise, if you look at low, 2 have been permitted, balance of 56. Now, if you look at moderate, the number of permits issued far exceeds the target of 36. 136 permits have been issued over the past 5 years, leaving no balance, of course, and the same applies to above moderate. No real problem meeting those moderate and above moderate income targets. And that then leaves us with a total of 410 units the past 5 years and a remaining RHNA, which is 120 units in this slide, That's the sum of the very low and low. But I should just point out that this, again, this is based on permits issued, so it does not include the units that you have approved at 299 East Thousand Oaks Boulevard. There are 11 very low-income units there. And the Pinecrest project, which we're also looking forward to it going forward, which tentatively has 80 affordable units. So those would take a big bite out of the remaining total of 120, assuming that they're all in the low and very low income category, those 91 units. So here you begin to see the relationship between the projects that come before you and how we're striving to meet state mandates. Graphically, this is what the prior table looks like. So very low on the left-hand side, yellow shows the arena allocation / target, and then the orange denotes the number of units that have been permitted. So you can see with very low, we have permitted about a quarter of our target. On the low, we actually have fewer. We've only permitted about 3% of our target, so that's an area of focus. Moderate, well over, actually it's almost 4 times the target, and above moderate, about over 3 times the target. So really no problem meeting moderate and above moderate income. Those are income categories that builders tend to focus on. The challenge is addressing the low and very low income targets that the state provides to us. I also wanted to just take a moment to go over income levels. We talk about these 4 income categories, and just so everybody is clear on this, and just as a little 3-minute refresher, when we talk about income levels, they're set by the state and they're based on a county median income level. So you look here at the top of the image, last year the county median income level for a 4-person household was $96,000. So that is sort of the reference point. And then if you look at these categories, this is what they equate to approximately of that median. There's some other variables that the state factors in, but 30 to 50% is the definition of very low. 50 to 80% of area median income is low. 80 to 120% is moderate, and of course above moderate is beyond that. So if you look at these percentages and you look at this median, and the state factors in, like I said, a couple of other variables, you end up with these income levels. So when we talk about a very low income residence, the maximum annual income for a 4-person household is about $51,000. And you can see as you go down here on the right-hand column, $81,000 approximately for low income, moderate $115,000 is the maximum income. So then this sets the sort of framework for how we evaluate potential residents in these units. And then those are checked every year by city staff. They check it in terms of reports submitted by the property owners and managers. In terms of the Housing Successor Agency, we also report back expenditures. In this case, it was about $120,000 in administrative costs, the value in terms of assets and loans for the Successor Agency, and the remaining number of units that were assisted in the past. So with that, staff is recommending that you consider and then direct staff to file this 2018 General Plan and Housing Element Annual Progress Report, and direct staff to provide copies to the State Office of Planning and Research and to the State Department of Housing and Community Development. And with that, I would be happy to answer questions. And to my left is Jeff Spector, who is a senior planner and who was the case planner on this project. Thank you.
Let's see. Council questions. We'll begin with Councilmember Adam.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're looking at a 5-year time period here. And I know I've been here for the last 5 years. And Councilmember Bill LaPena's been here for the last 5 years. And I think, Mayor, you've been here for almost those 5 years, give or take a month or two maybe. And so am I to understand that over this 5-year period that the three of us have presided, this city has had 410 units built, which averages roughly 80 units a year.
That's correct.
Those are the numbers. And this is with a city of 129,000 people, a 55 square mile city. That's it.
That's correct.
Okay. So you categorize that as moderate growth. I'd probably categorize that as infinitesimal growth, because it works out to less than 1% of our overall housing stock, which is about 48,000 units. I think it works out to 0.8%. So the three of us have presided over those additional units. And again, this is in the face of Measure E, where we've had many units available for the last 10 years. They've been not utilized. This is in the face of a general plan that allows us to build up to 81,000 units, which we're not going to do, by the way, and we're going to revise that when we do our general plan comprehensive update, but it allows us to build that. We haven't come anywhere near that either. So we're not going to be the San Fernando Valley anytime soon.
No, we won't.
No, we won't. I didn't think so. And I think a big reason for this is a number of things. We have Measure E in place, which is a density measure. We have the Parks Initiative in place. We have SOAR in place, Save Open Space and Agricultural Resources. We have an approval process that is extremely rigorous to build anything in the city. We have to get a pre-application, we have to go to the staff, not we, but builders have to go to the staff, they have to go to the planning commission, then they have to go back to the city council. It's an extremely rigorous process. Cost of land here in the city is extremely high, and for all intents and purposes, the city's basically built out to begin with. And we have sacrosanct 15,000 acres of open space. This is basically untouchable. So would you say all these factors play into the fact that we've only built 400 units in 5 years?
Oh, of course, yes.
Okay, well, I guess the case I'm trying to make here is that the city of Thousand Oaks is very conservative in the housing that we've built, and we're very cautious in what we approve, and we're looking for, of course, high quality, and I think that the numbers speak to themselves. And it was interesting to get those numbers this evening, because it shows you as a city exactly where we stand when it comes to housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adam. Councilmember Bill de la Peña.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. What I see here, of course, is the lack of very low income or low income housing in the city of Thousand Oaks. It is reality that we are behind the numbers. In attending the State of the Many Mansions address this morning, it was pretty sobering. There are over 4,000 people on a wait list, and Many Mansions, for the first time in its history, is closing the wait list. Executive Director Rick Schroeder said they're closing the wait list on March 15th because they don't want to give families false hope. If you have to wait 10 years, and some residents have been on the wait list now going on 10 years, you have to simply close the list. So while Thousand Oaks has issued few permits, building permits in the last 5 years, where the pain truly is in low-income housing. And I would like for the city to take a more proactive role in working with Many Mansions to look at specific sites in the city. Of course, money is always the issue. Resident opposition is a big problem. But when you see the apartments being built in other cities, in Oxnard, Moore Park, Santa Paula, Simi Valley, they are absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. They're more beautiful than some of the homes here in Thousand Oaks. And I would like for the residents to take that into consideration when eventually we will have another low-income proposal, because we must. That don't be afraid. don't be afraid that just because somebody is earning less money and needs low-income housing, that means that they will bring any negative value to the neighborhood. It just won't happen. We have affordable housing, low-income housing in the city of Thousand Oaks. Cannot differentiate that housing on Hillcrest from regular housing. People need this housing. I hope that we will find parcels in the city that can be identified not for above moderate income, because we have all kinds of luxury apartments now being built on Thousand Oaks Boulevard for those millennials, but we also need it for the low-income families because they do bring value to our community. So thank you very much for this report, and I really would like to for the city to work with many mansions to identify parcels that the city can pay for. Don't know how yet, because that's the big question, to get that number to where it needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Adam?
Thank you, Mayor. I couldn't agree with you more, Claudia. We're definitely at a deficit when it comes to very low and low-income housing. We need it. It's funny, too, because very low and low income isn't all that low. We're talking workforce housing for teachers and firefighters and police officers. Veterans, absolutely. The disadvantage that we face, and I know you all know this, is we don't have a redevelopment agency anymore. In fact, we had $25 million stripped from our redevelopment agency by the state of California, so we can't rely on that. And you brought up a very good point. Sometimes the neighbors rally when they feel that a low-income project is coming into their neighborhood, when it's concentrated all in very low and low income. So that leaves us with a situation where, since we can't build it ourselves, and many mansions is strapped for funds, we're almost, they're not going to, what, you visited them this morning. What is their situation?
Well, they're doing quite well in terms of funding for development. They are building in Los Angeles County and elsewhere in Ventura. They are not giving up on Thousand Oaks, of course, but they realize, land is expensive everywhere you go. And but what is a problem is the neighborhood opposition.
Yes. Yeah. We lost a Many Mansions project that they pulled out of because the surrounding neighborhood was against the project. So that's the problem with Many Mansions. So what are we faced with? When a developer comes forward with a project, we can insist that part of those units be affordable, whether it's very low or low income. Like 299, for example, we were fortunate to get, I think it was a dozen or so units there. They're very low and low income. And to avoid this neighborhood opposition, I think we've taken the tact that we sprinkle low-income housing around town by insisting that projects include that with their development intentions. So I think you're right, the neighbors have to be more receptive, and then I think it's incumbent upon this council to be more receptive as well to building projects that come along that offer the public benefit of very low and low-income housing. So that's the balance that we face. But thank you for those comments.
I second that. Mr. Powers.
Thanks, Mayor McQuay. I just wanted to make one quick follow-up point and not that it's completely missing from the discussion, but I just wanted to make sure to emphasize the point that there is a role for the private sector in all of this, and that I remind the council that last October you pre-screened a project that was a combination market rate and senior low-income project at the Pinecrest School. And we advanced that project based on the developer's timeline as an attempt to close their escrow. And since that time, staff has continued to push and monitor that project. And the applicant and others are continuing to work with the property owner on that site to make the numbers work. And this comes down to a private sector portion of the discussion. And absent as Councilmember Adam mentioned, the revenue that used to come from RDAs and other sources of funds that would come through, it's difficult to square these types of projects. The council is trying to push these efforts forward, and it does rely a bit on the private sector to help meet us halfway as we're coming forward on some of these projects.
We have no public speakers, council discussion, or motion. Councilmember Bill de la Pena?
Yes, thank you very much for what is always a very lively discussion regarding housing. I move staff recommendation 1 and 2.
Thank you, Councilmember. Ms. Rodriguez?
The motion carries 4-0 with Councilmember Jones absent.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Now brings us to item 9D. Again, we have Mr. Mark Town, Community Development Director, Dr. Jonathan Kramer, founder, principal attorney, telecom law firm, and Patrick Heher, Assistant City Attorney. And we will be covering urgency ordinance and resolution amending regulations and policies related to wireless communication facilities and resolutions initiating amendments to regulations and policies concerning wireless communication facilities. That's a mouthful. Take it away.
It definitely is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this item does relate to wireless facility policy. And specifically, tonight we're going to be talking about new rules that were adopted by the FCC with regard to a certain class of wireless facilities. And this is set against a backdrop of 5G technology, which is the next wave of wireless technology. Right now, we're still working primarily with 4G, but the 5G technology is much faster. It enables much faster transfer of information. It has a variety of applications, including autonomous cars and so forth. Because this is and in part by design, these facilities are smaller than your traditional macro sites. They have smaller radii, about 300 to 500 feet instead of miles. And so by default, we need, or we are likely to need a larger number of smaller facilities throughout the city to accommodate this new technology. This image is one that simply shows the current 5G coverage. You can see most of it is sort of in this east and southeastern portion of the country, with spots in Los Angeles and Sacramento on the West Coast in terms of rollout of 5G. Now, currently, the city has approximately 140 wireless facilities, and I know many of you have dealt with these in the past. We have 4 primary carriers in the city, as shown here: AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon. And these facilities today, they come in all shapes and sizes. They come in all sorts of locations and on new structures, existing structures. As shown here, some of the more popular locations are on buildings, electric transmission poles like the SCE lattice towers, sport field light poles, etc. And now I just wanted to take a quick moment to look at our existing wireless policies. So back in 1997, the City Council adopted what we call City Resolution 97-197, which has governed the location design of macro sites and some smaller sites over this intervening period. In 2009, the FCC adopted a regulatory ruling which established timeframes for wireless facility siting, and those are shown here: 90 and 150 days. And then in 2012, FCC adopted another rule which relates to what we call 6409 projects. And basically, these are modifications, which in the FCC's mind are less than substantial, to existing facilities, and those have a short time frame of 60 days. And we've been implementing the 6409 federal policies since they were adopted. So we're here, though, tonight to really focus on the most recent FCC rule, which is known as 18133, published last fall. And again, its stated goal is to facilitate deployment of this 5G infrastructure. And to be direct, it limits local authority over these quote-unquote small wireless facilities. And in your packet tonight, we have included some attachments which are intended just to give you a flavor of the FCC's viewpoint on 5G and how important to the FCC the deployment of this infrastructure is the future of the country and our communication technology. So some of the items that we're going to be talking about tonight are summarized here. These facilities, they are primarily, we expect them to be primarily within the public right-of-way. Access is specifically granted in that area, although they could be outside the right-of-way as well. And we're going to talk about fees and applications, shot clocks, which is the time frame within which these have to be processed. Then we're also going to talk a little bit about aesthetic rules. Part of the FCC ruling, which again is part of your packet, states that cities and counties must be as objective as possible in terms of our rules and our standards, and those need to be published in advance so that wireless companies can understand the city's position and can design a facility accordingly. So SWF stands for Small Wireless Facility. So I'm going to jump right in terms of some of the numerical standards that the FCC has mandated. First of all, the antennas for these facilities can be no more than 3 cubic feet per antenna, although there's no limit on the number of antennas. And this image here on the right side of your screen, this shows very typical public right-of-way design. You can see the replacement light pole here, the light fixture, and then what we call a radome on top. And typically these types of designs have 3 antennas in that cylindrical structure, which if you look at the volume of the cylindrical structure is about 9 cubic feet. The equipment for these facilities has to be a maximum of 28 cubic feet. And this image on the right shows not 28 cubic feet, but it gives you an idea about the approximate size. These are not huge structures, but they obviously are quite visible if you get a number of these. And so I'll talk about this later, but why not mention it now? Our approach is that these have to all be underground so that we don't have to look at this. Now, height standards. The small wireless facilities have several structure height standards, and these are or options. So an applicant can locate these facilities on structures that are 50 feet or less, including antennas. They can be in structures that are no more than 10% taller than adjacent. And they can also be located on structures that don't extend beyond 50 feet or by more than 10%, whichever is greater. We'll see how this plays out, but for street light facilities, in general, they're about 30 feet in height, excluding that radome that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And so the facilities we have in town in terms of street light designs are currently about 35 to 36 feet in total height. Fees are actually set in large part by the FCC. They set what they consider presumptively acceptable rates, $500 for applications involving up to 5 facilities on existing structures, $1,000 for new structures, and then an annual rate for the small cell access rates. Now, this is probably the most important part of these new rules, and that is the shot clocks. These are the time frames within which we have to process these applications. So the FCC is mandating that facilities proposed on existing structures be processed, and I note this in the next bullet, they have to be processed in terms of application to building permit issuance, including all intervening steps. in 60 days, 2 months. For facilities proposed on new structures, say a replacement streetlight, it's 3 months. And that's, again, application to building permit issuance. As I think will become evident in a moment, it's not practical, it's not even feasible to meet these deadlines of 2 and 3 months and go through a normal planning process. It's not feasible. This is a diagrammatic illustration, and I won't go into all of the steps, but this illustrates a typical process and potential steps for a wireless case that would go to the Planning Commission, for instance. And so at the top in the blue is the planning process. You can see it's composed of a number of steps. A number of these steps have mandated timeframes associated with them, particularly in terms of public notice. And that overall process in blue is roughly about 4 months. In the green is the appeal process. If somebody appeals a decision of the Planning Commission, then obviously it would go to yourselves for final adjudication, and that is typically 2 to 3 months. And then the building permit process is about 2 months. Now, theoretically, that can be conducted concurrently with the planning process, but that's usually not a good idea because sometimes the design can change through the process. But it is an option, and it takes a couple months. So when you sum these three processes together, assuming that a planning commission decision is appealed, then you're looking at roughly an 8 to 9 month process. That's our normal approach. So again, we're mandated now to process these application to building permit issuance, including all intervening appeals, hearings, et cetera, theoretically, that type of a process has to be accommodated within 60 to 90 days. And staff has looked at this very carefully, and our conclusion is that it's not possible to meet those deadlines with our existing process, as illustrated here. So staff is recommending the following approach, and it was developed in coordination with Dr. Jonathan Kramer, seated to my left, who is an expert on wireless technology, both from a technical and a legal standpoint. So I'm glad that Mr. Kramer is here, as you have seen him on other occasions. And also, while I'm doing it, I'll introduce the other team members tonight. Patrick Keher, Assistant City Attorney, who has worked extensively on this project. And again, Jeff Spector, Case Planner and Senior Planner. Okay, back to the recommended approach. What staff is recommending tonight is basically two things. First is that you adopt an urgency ordinance with an attached policy resolution that addresses the small wireless facilities. We're also asking that it include practices basically to formalize them that staff have been using for this other class of facilities, these comparatively small changes, what we call 6409. We didn't adopt policies for 6409 after the FCC took their ruling or made their ruling in 2012. We've just been following federal law, and now we just want to formalize that practice. Has not presented issues between that point and tonight. We're also asking that you initiate a regular ordinance with corresponding policies. We've included a resolution to start that process tonight. That would go through our normal process. It would be reviewed by the Planning Commission and come back to you for final action. Okay, the urgency ordinance, it will amend the municipal code. We feel that it's important to protect public health, safety, and welfare, to protect public interests in the public right-of-way, to protect private interests adjacent to and within the public right-of-way. Urgency ordinances go into effect immediately upon your action, and it does require a 4/5 vote, which means that tonight it is vital that all of you support this idea or it would not pass. Now, that's the overview. Now I want to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of this. What staff is suggesting, and again, we've given this extensive thought, had extensive discussions. We are recommending that these applications be processed without public notice, hearings, or appeals, because that is the only way to feasibly meet these new federal standards. We cannot follow a normal process and still process these from application at our counter to issuance of building permits in 2 or 3 months, respectively, for facilities on existing and new structures. This is how, as I just mentioned, we've been processing the 6409 requests since 2012, but these are not comparable to 6409. This is a different class of facilities, as you just heard, in terms of volume, height, etc. Now, given that process, staff is recommending that the city engineer be given the ability to approve these facilities in the public right-of-way, because that director or his designees are most familiar with all of the various improvements and interests in that physical area, which we do anticipate will be the majority of applications, and that the community development director would have approval authority over such facilities proposed outside the right-of-way. They could be on a building that's adjacent to a public right-of-way, for instance. We have included in your materials in the resolution policies that we think give us the most control possible over this new class of facilities given the FCC's ruling. One is that we include locational preferences, so from most to least preferred, we have a hierarchy. We prefer these be located in non-residential zones, for example, or the corresponding specific plan designations that are non-residential. If it's going to be in residential, we prefer that these be located 250 feet or more from an area, a structure approved for residential use. And then if it's within that area, that the applicant has to locate it as far as possible from any nearby residential structure. And if an applicant is proposing something that does not meet this most to least preferred hierarchy, then we are asking for a clear and complete analysis of why a facility cannot be located, for instance, in a non-residential zone compared to a residential zone. Again, trying to give the city the most control we can have over these types of facilities. We also have a hierarchy of structural preferences. So, as shown here, staff's most preferred location is a replacement street light, as illustrated to the right here and as in the previous photographs. A new street light with an antenna facility on it would be the second most desirable. And then on down the hierarchy to a replacement or new traffic signal, a new non-replacement pole, which is the same as a monopole. And then our least favorite option is a wood pole. And it's our least favorite option because you can't hide the wiring and a lot of the related equipment inside a wood pole, as you can on other poles. We are identifying certain structures that we are identifying as prohibited structures, including decorative poles, such as this example from Thousand Oaks, on signs, utility poles that are scheduled for upcoming removal, and again, new wooden poles are would not be allowed under this approach. Aesthetic requirements. As I mentioned before, the FCC is looking for objective standards. So we are developing those as we speak. The new aesthetic rules go into effect next month that were enacted last year by the FCC. But if you look to the right of this image, this is actually a prototypical design that was developed by Public Works staff. And as you can see, it would have a replacement pole, a replacement street light, and then some type of a structure on top, hopefully a shroud or something comparable. Again, this would be about 30 feet. It varies depending on the plate that you're referencing. And then these radomes tend to be about 5 to 6 feet in height and about 12 to 18 inches in diameter. So this is a prototypical design that we have recently developed with the idea that if a wireless carrier wants to go in a certain area, we would encourage them to adopt a comparable design or something that's even less obvious. We also, in your resolution, I won't go through all of this, but we have standard conditions, which again are part of our effort to make sure that our standards are known to the wireless companies ahead of time, that everything's online. They can now look at those through our code and the resolution and understand the city's position. One of the most important of these standard conditions that we go through on all facilities proposed in the city is that they always have to meet the FCC's RF standards. That involves a technical analysis by an RF engineer. Dr. Kramer's firm reviews that report to ensure that it's accurate and comprehensive, and that will continue with these new standards. So this pie chart is intended to show sort of the wireless policy framework that we're looking at. Again, City Resolution 97197 we've used for many facilities in the city. It's not going away. It's still there, most applicable to, again, macro sites. We have the 6409 rules for comparatively small changes to existing facilities. We've been implementing that, meeting the 60-day clock, and that would continue, but it would be formalized through the resolution and ordinance before you tonight. And then the third piece of the pie is this new FCC Rule 18133 piece. And again, our approach is to, in full recognition of federal law, to exercise as much local control as we can over this defined group of wireless facilities that are intended to accommodate 5G technology. So with that, staff is, again, recommending that you adopt the urgency ordinance tonight that would go immediately into effect, adopt the corresponding policy resolution, and then also adopt the resolution that would initiate the regular ordinance that we would then take through Planning Commission and bring back to you in the future. And with that, again, I'd be happy to answer any questions as would the other team members here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Town. Dr. Kramer, it's good to have you with us. I want to start out with the questions. Typically, I let the rest of the council speak first, but I'm curious. I've heard talk that by 2030, with this 5G and driverless cars, and that a third of the workforce a third of the jobs will be lost through automation, whether it be transportation or delivery drivers or cashiers. Is this why there's a push at the federal level for this idea of automation? And with all your insight, can you share that?
Flying cars.
Flying cars? Is that?
Yes, we're supposed to have flying cars now. Let me simply say that the FCC's rules, not one place in them do they specify 5G. Do they require 5G? Do they require 4G, 3G? Not one section of the FCC rules requires deployment of any new wireless facility anywhere at all, much less in areas that have no coverage, rural areas, for example. So we have to separate the rules from the talk. And the talk is very exciting, unless perhaps your job is being displaced by it. But really, this is a fundamental change in a regulatory policy that may or may not open up the door to all of these things that we hear that apparently we need, like autonomous cars and so forth. I don't know.
I'm just curious as to the urgency at the federal level that they would usurp our autonomy. I mean, this is basically thrust on us, and I'm just trying to get an answer, trying to figure it out.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I teach regulatory law and policy at Northeastern University in the doctoral program, and we deal with agencies that really have shifted their focus from public protection to promoting the industry they're supposed to be regulating, and that's what we're dealing with at the FCC.
If I may, Mayor, I will also state that if you read the exhibits that we have, the attachments that we have for this project, you will note that there is a federal statement, if you will, that they put when they want to throw this regulation at us and all the local entities across the nation, by the way, and that is, they're calling it the 5G Global race, and it's to benefit Americans. And that's how they start out with their analysis for this project and this new regulation. And that's important because these regulations came into effect on January 14th of this year. There are other ones coming into effect in April 14th, which is the aesthetic aspect of it. And so we're bringing this as an urgency because if we don't have something in place before April 15th or 14th, there could be challenges. So we take what they're doing. There are challenges actually to this regulation at this point. We don't know what the status of those challenges are at this point and what's going to happen. But for now, we know that these regulations are in effect, and that's why we have this urgency, because we want to avoid unnecessary blight. We want to avoid impacts to our public infrastructure. So if we don't do this at this point, we need to. We might be in trouble in the future.
Well, just so you know, I'm in favor of you getting ahead of this. I was just more inquiring of the doctor as to the urgency at the federal level that they would be doing this, and I appreciate your answers, your insights. I'll open it up to the rest of the council. Councilmember Bill de la Pena.
Thank you, Mayor McCoy. Interesting discussion. Mr. Kramer, I know we go back, 16 years or so. We met when I was on the Planning Commission, and in the process, you've earned your PhD. Congratulations. You said that the FCC is trying to accommodate the very industry they're supposed to regulate. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Given that now the cities are forced to deal with this, I'm trying to figure out, this is really kind of shocking for Thousand Oaks, because we pride ourselves on public notification, on listening to the residents, on the aesthetics, and all of that is thrown out the window with this with these new requirements. So in looking at what will change, everything will be done administratively, no more public hearings, nothing at all. But there is a little sliver of hope with the locational preferences, structural preferences, and prohibited structures. I was wondering if, and I'm personally worried about the impact it will have on residential areas, but if all of our light poles were decorative, what would the picture look like?
Under the present proposed rules, decorative light poles are not available for use as cell sites. The alternative would be that the wireless companies would install their own new poles in residential areas. Remember that in this technology range, we're looking at coverages of 300 to 500 feet per cell site in any direction. And you can imagine that the city's successful program of controlling where these are to major thoroughfares and so forth will be seriously impacted when a major thoroughfare is more than 300 feet away from a particular house. So that's a fundamental change. But in terms of the poles, there is a specific rule in the guidelines before you tonight that does not allow the use of decorative poles. Again, that's an aesthetic protection issue.
Correct. So if we wanted to protect residential areas more specifically, and I'm just asking hypothetically, specific plan designations would be the ones that we would prefer that they stay out of, the way I'm reading this? Or is specific plan designation something that you would prefer?
Well, our decorative light poles are primarily found in specific plan areas, downtown Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan, for instance. So those would be off limits under this approach, again, on aesthetic grounds, but we are leaving the door open for other facilities in the same area, as Dr. Kramer mentioned, a new light pole or a monopole, although that's not our preferred approach.
Yes, because it says the locations from most to least preferred. So most preferred would be non-residential zones and specific plan designations, but specific plan designations, as you say, have the decorative poles, and therefore they couldn't really put anything there.
Well, there may have been a little bit of confusion on that just in terms of the image that I used. That bullet point was intended to mean non-residential areas or specific plans with non-residential areas, not entire specific plans. In other words, specific plans are custom zoning, and if they have areas that are designated for non-residential, then we would prefer that these facilities be located in those portions of a specific plan, the non-residential portion. The overarching idea is, of course, to look at these as far away from residential structures as possible. And the first cut is non-residential versus residential.
Unless the residential light poles were or are decorative.
Well, if the residential poles were all decorative, then again, the applicant would need to consider a new pole, a new light pole, and that would be the most likely solution.
If I may, one of the important things to think about is we have to be concerned about capacity. So we're not challenged now with coverage necessarily. We're challenged with capacity. And so that capacity also includes going to the residential areas with all the residents who have iPads and telephones and cell phones and TVs, et cetera. So our goal here with having some of these objective standards that we're going to have published, so any carrier can come to our city and look at our standards and know these are some of the objective types of structures that they can build. And it's also important to note that a structure can be many things. Can be a building, can be a pole, can be a water tank, for example. So the word structure has been very carefully crafted by this regulation to include those things. And so what we're trying to do is say, if it's going to be in the right-of-way, we have some control, objective control with maybe how it looks like. And we believe staff's recommendation is we look at a street light, that's probably the less intrusive versus a monopole or versus some other type of structure that could be used. So we do have to expect, and let's be very clear, we have to expect that they're going to go into the residential areas, absolutely. But what we're trying to say is in those residential areas on a street, we want to have them on locations that are farthest away if possible from the residents themselves, if that's possible. And the next thing, one of the things that we're asking for in our policy is in the right-of-way, we're asking that if they have equipment other than the antennas, that they underground those. Just like any utility would be on Teal Boulevard, we would have them underground like any other type of utility. They're getting the right to be in the right-of-way without question, so we're going to have them act like another utility and do that undergrounding. Now, there might be new technology that avoids that for them. Absolutely, that might be true, and we'll have to look at that objectively for when they come in with these applications. The other concern we have is, and it's important to remember, if you go to page 3 of your staff report, there are very, very specific constraints that local entities have when it comes to these things. And one of them has to do with the RF emissions, and that still is on board here. We cannot challenge that in any way for the local entity. What we have Dr. Kramer do and his team as our consultant is when we get an application, we have them evaluate to ensure that the minimum requirements by the federal government in regards to the RF emissions are being met. And if you would like to, Dr. Kramer can certainly give you an example of how those are measured and how we are protected and how the federal government looks at that. But it is important to note that's just one example of how they're constraining. This new rule, Regulation 18-133, it adds additional constraints now to how we're reacting to these wireless facilities. And again, these are mainly going to be small wireless facilities in the public right-of-way because it's less expensive for them to go into the public right-of-way than into private, for example, where they have to expend more money and probably have a higher lease rate.
Thank you for the explanation. I appreciate your coming up with this staff report and the urgency ordinance. We seem to have no choice, and it will be a bitter pill to swallow for the residents of our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Engler?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We don't have a large audience here today. I hope there's a lot of people looking at this at home because, in effect, this is the public hearing on a lot of structures that are going to be put into town. Give me a good idea. because the range of these antennas is 300 to 500 feet. We have 58, square miles. I mean, we're talking a lot of poles that are going to be having these devices put on them. Is that a good assumption?
I speak at a lot of wireless industry conferences, so do my partner, because under the Godfather rule, you keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. And currently, what I hear RF engineers at the conferences say is that they're looking at about 60 small cells per company per square mile. Let me kind of pencil this out for Thousand Oaks. And let me be ultra conservative. Instead of saying 55 square miles, let's just do the residential area, roughly about 40 square miles in the city. And instead of saying 60 cell sites per square mile, let's only use half of that, 30. We have 4 wireless carriers. When you do all of the math, you come up to somewhere around 4,000 to 5,000 new cell sites over the next 5 years in Thousand Oaks alone. Is that realistic? Do we really believe that's going to happen? I'll give you an example. Since these rules went into effect in January 14th, another city that we work with, this is public record, so I have no problem sharing with it, it's El Monte. They're only 9.6 square miles. They've received over 70 applications for small cells in about almost 6 weeks, less than 6 weeks. So the build out is going to happen. It will move here, and that's one of the reasons why staff is very concerned about getting these rules adopted so that before the rush hits here, and it's normal to go into the metro areas and then grow out from there, we want to have the rules in place. But you're looking at thousands of cell sites in Thousand Oaks over the next 5 years compared to what is effectively a handful of 160 some odd cell sites now, 140. So that's the magnitude, that's the order of magnitude, council member, that we're looking at.
Thank you for that. I think it's important for people to know that there's going to be a visual impact with these on practically every corner. And there's not, my understanding is that we don't have a whole lot of say that this will be coming. There is some benefit, and I think Mayor touched on it a little bit. There are some benefits to 5G that might be out there that are exciting for a lot of people.
Or frightening.
Or threatening. There's always a two-edged sword. But there will be an impact in our town that really we're going to be giving staff the ability to approve most of these. There just won't be time to do a normal planning process. So we have to do this. I agree 100% with the undergrounding of the controlling boxes. That seems to be a more visually impacting item. But there's not a lot that we can say. I agree with Council Member Bill De La Pena. We don't have a whole lot of say in this. Nope. So let's try to make as good a deal as we can.
Well, if there's no other questions from the council, we will come to public comments. We have 2 speakers tonight on this issue. Our first speaker will be Arij Rajput. Thank you for staying with us through the evening. Welcome.
Can you see me over the podium?
Okay. Yep.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Arij Rajput. I am here on behalf of the California Wireless Association, and it seems we are not that popular lately. But I understand the city's concerns, and I have read the ordinance, but I'm just here today to ask for maybe a continuance on this item, or to allow CALWA a little bit more time to do a comprehensive review and actually sit at the table with the city and the city's consultant to work together on an ordinance, bring about our concerns here and address those specifically, and especially with some of the concerns that I heard at the city today. So we essentially would just like more time to be able to do that and work with the city and with TLF as well.
Okay, we'll consider that.
Thank you.
But thank you for coming out. And then our next speaker, Bill Lind. Thanks for coming out, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Council. There have been powerful cell towers deployed around California lately in more numerous amounts, including in Northern California. These close proximity microwave radiation antennas, called small cells, are mounted on public utility poles and light poles in the public rights-of-way. Some are within 100 feet of homes, and most importantly, they can be hazardous. Established science proves that exposure to wireless radiation can cause neurological illness, DNA damage, heart problems, reduced fertility, and increased rates of cancer. These transmitters can be so close to our homes, they're a potential violation of a guaranteed constitutional right to privacy. Once the pole is claimed by the carrier, they can increase the power, the height, the width, and swap out equipment without review. This is happening without knowledge or consent and already in communities in California. California cities such as Monterey, Hillsborough, Mill Valley, Ross, San Anselmo, Petaluma, and Sebastopol have already rebuffed Verizon and passed local wireless and zoning ordinances to protect their residents. I have included a attachment in the city of Petaluma. I'd like to give the council and the mayor to review and compare it to your proposals for your ordinance changes. Currently, the city of Simi Valley is in the process of reviewing the same issues, by the way. This needs to be done no later than April 15th, after which a window of opportunity closes. We lose the ability to use the aesthetic standard before the FCC report and order. Another step I'd like the city of Thousand Oaks to consider is to join the appeal lawsuit process that Marin County has joined with municipalities against the FCC regarding these new cell phone technologies, new cell phone towers that the recent ruling had adopted. The county is taking the legal step to protest the federal government's seizing of local control on the deployment of future technologies, including 5G, and how implementation costs can be recovered. While local governments have always been preempted from regulating based on radio frequency radiation concerns, local governments have always been able to regulate neighborhood aesthetics and other safety matters. The new FCC ruling starts to handcuff severely traditional areas of local regulation with new time limits and constraints, as explained by your staff. There's an inconvenient truth that carriers don't want the city to know about. It is called fiber optics, which is safer, cheaper over time, private, and won't affect property values. Is also more energy
Mr. Lynn, you're going to have
efficient.
to put a caboose on the comment train. We're running out of time. But
Okay.
please, give us your
Make sure whatever you enact that your 250 solution is better than a lot of other communities are adopting or considering to adopt. So please adopt that 250 solution in your ordinance. And also, if you don't make sure that excellent aesthetic ordinances or upgrades to the ordinance are done, your property values will decrease sharply, as seen in towns like Sonoma and Petaluma. This big push from the FCC and the current administration to speed up cell phone process networks, all it is just a push in order to get ready for 5G without regard to safety, the environment, or privacy. Thank you.
Mr. Lynn. Thank you, sir. Councilmember Adam?
For Mark or Dr. Kramer, one of the speakers just suggested a continuation. However, this is being presented to us as an urgency ordinance, and we are on a time frame here. And as you say, we want to get ahead of what could be an inundation of permit requests for small cell wireless. So a continuation would seem to me to not be
Councilmember Adam?
Advisable.
Absolutely, you are correct. Our recommendation is to move forward with this urgency ordinance tonight. We are reacting to this
The
federal
FCC.
regulation, and we were given deadlines. January 14th, it became effective. We have hired one of the premier experts in the nation to help us draft this ordinance, and our first obligation is to protect our city with this urgency ordinance. Certainly, staff would be happy, as we always do with any project, that we would meet with any of the stakeholders and meet with them. We have a resolution for initiating a second ordinance that goes through the standard process as a precaution, but we will be happy to meet with them and talk to them, have them meetings with them. Absolutely, we would do that. But tonight, our recommendation is that you move forward with this urgency ordinance. It is imperative that we do that to protect our city's values and infrastructure at this time. And the next thing I would like to do is have Dr. Kramer talk to you about the RF emission comments from the second speaker.
Before I do, a bit of framing. I've been working for the city continuously as its technical advisor for 32 years now. So essentially every wireless project that's come into the city has gone across my desk at one point or another. So I want to also follow up on what Mark just said about, or Patrick just said about the fact that we can do both. In fact, we're the ones who actually sent notice to the California Wireless Association of this meeting tonight. I presume they're here because of the notice that we sent to them, because we wanted to make sure that the industry, as broadly as possible, had the opportunity to participate. That said, the participation process that Patrick's laid out makes the most sense about adopting tonight and then going through the regular process. So we can accommodate CalWA's request, I think, very comfortably. That said, I'll turn to the other comments that have come in. Most notably, the public is concerned about radio frequency emissions. I know several of the council members have heard me talk about this in the past, but if you'll indulge me for a couple of minutes so that the public at home who's watching this tonight can get a better sense of what's going on, I think it'd be worth it. Back in 1996, the Telecom Act was passed by Congress. One of the provisions in it required the FCC to develop national standards for RF emissions. Prior to that time, local governments could set their own, and there was a patchwork of standards around the country. The FCC took on the task in 1997 and went to public radiological health officials, wireless industry, the military. They looked at standards in other countries, and they came up with a standard for the U.S. The standard for the U.S., by the way, is based on a couple of things. It's not a unitary standard. It reflects the fact that we as people, big bags of water, if you will, absorb certain frequencies more efficiently than others. So the FCC even took that into account. And at the end of the day, they created a standard that had a safety margin built into it. I'm going to use, as a college professor, I think I'm allowed to use a visual aid to explain what that safety standard is. I have a 12-inch ruler. Assume at the top, that's the point where you can actually measure some effect caused by RF, and it's heating. It's not a DNA change. These are non-ionizing emissions, just heating. So the FCC had to set its national standard for public exposure 24/7, somewhere between 0 and 12. We know they didn't set it at 0 because that means there's no emission. We know they didn't set it at 12 because that's the point where you can actually measure some change. So on this scale of 0 to 12, where did the FCC set its standard? 0.26 inches. And as it turns out mathematically, that means that there's a 50 times 50 safety margin between the maximum we can be exposed without even knowing it and the point where you can actually measure an effect from that exposure. Now, that's the technical part. Let me switch now to the lawyer part, which is this is an area where the FCC completely occupies the field. They are the sole national agency that sets these standards. We can't even adopt the FCC standards as our own. So the question is, and this is in the Telecom Act, this is in the FCC rules, and this is even at state law. The question is, does a proposed project comply with the FCC rules? If it does, then legally, that's as far as we're allowed to take it. There are certainly very thoughtful public concerns about the effects of RF, but at a local government level, like here in Thousand Oaks, we're not allowed to nullify a federal rule. So at the end of the day, one of the things, as you've already heard, that we do, our firm, is we evaluate whether the applicant's project will comply with the FCC rules. And interestingly, there are some times when they've proposed projects that don't. So we've caught those. But I can tell you that the city of Thousand Oaks historically, for a long time, decades, has evaluated compliance with the FCC rules as a threshold standard for approval, which is far more than virtually, well, most other cities. They don't have the technical expertise to do that. So that's kind of the long and short. That's how we got here. That's in terms of the safety margins that are built in, a 50-time safety margin. That's what we're allowed to do legally and what we're not allowed to do under federal, state, and even congressional law. So that's kind of the tour of RF safety. If you have questions, of course, I'll happily answer them. But that's kind of a broad tour of the entire subject. Finally, I think there was a comment about joining the lawsuits. I can tell you that our firm represents the League of California Cities, the League of Oregon Cities, and the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. We filed in the Ninth Circuit to challenge these rules. But at this point, these are the rules that are in effect, and we must follow them until the courts tell us that either they confirm the FCC and say, yes, you got to continue to follow it, or they say no. But we're deeply involved in that process, representing effectively 1,000 jurisdictions, including Thousand Oaks.
Very helpful. Thank you, Doctor. Councilmember Bill de la Peña, did you have a question?
Quick question regarding the leagues, California leagues and Oregon leagues of cities. You are representing both. Did you mention a third entity?
The Arizona League of Cities and Towns.
Okay, so all three of them. So would you then advise this a city like Thousand Oaks to join other California cities that are suing individually as part of amicus brief or anything like that?
That's his question.
Oh, okay.
I would certainly hold off, and if we want to have that discussion, we can certainly bring it in a proper arena to discuss. I think it's important to note that the regulations, as Dr. Kramer has said, the regulations are in effect right now, even with the lawsuit. That's very important to note. The April 15th date is on the horizon, 14th. It's on the horizon. It's very important to note that we have to, that's why we're doing this urgency. And one of the concerns we have with the federal regulation is there's a lot of definitions and vagueness and broadness in some of the terms. And part of the lawsuit, I think, is to try to get an understanding of what those terms mean, because it leads to problems when people or agencies have to affect that.
One thing, just Dr. Kramer, you can probably confirm this. In your representation with the California League of Cities, did you say that the league is filing an amicus brief?
Actually, the league is part of the
is a party
active
to
lawsuit.
the. Okay,
we're actually a party.
Right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Adam.
Well, thank you very much for the informative presentation. It's good to see you again, Dr. Kramer. I was on the Planning Commission when you would come to speak to us, and we had a lot more latitude back then than we do now. But it's clear to me that this is urgent, and that's why it was presented as an urgency ordinance, and that we do have an April 15th timeline. And the rules are the rules as they stand now. The League of California Cities may be able to change that, remains to be seen, but we've got to deal with what's in front of us. And I do want to commend staff for coming up with every opportunity possible within this framework that's been giving us to protect our citizens, protect the aesthetics of our community and the health of our citizens. We're going to do everything possible to make sure that we make this as aesthetically pleasing as possible. But, you know, there's a race to get 5G in this country, and the FCC's behind it, and AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint are all going to be part of that race. As you mentioned, the one community that had, what was it, 70 applications in the first 6 weeks?
Yeah, El Monte, 70 applications in a 9.5 square mile city.
Yeah, so we're going to get quite a few. So this, in other words, this is an ordinance we definitely have to, in my opinion, pass tonight. So I would like to move that we do, in fact, pass the staff recommendations for 9D, the urgency ordinance and resolution amending the regulations and policies related to wireless communication facilities.
Recommendations 1, 2, and 3. Is that correct?
Correct. 1, 2, 3.
Ms. Rodriguez? You needed 4/5. Looks like you got it.
The motion carries 4-0 with Councilmember Jones absent, and I do have an ordinance title to read into the record. Urgency ordinance adding Article 44 and amending Section 9-4.202, Section 9-4.214, and Section 9-4.2105 of the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code, regulating wireless communications facilities pursuant to applicable federal laws, ordinance number 1661 NS.
Thank you very much. Just to be clear to all the folks out there, tonight we were trying to get ahead of the mandates from the FCC, and we want to maintain, to the best of our ability, our autonomy and maintain the beauty of our city, and everything that we did tonight was for that purpose. So however you feel about 5G and these towers coming in, that's a federal issue. Take it up with your Congress member. But here locally, we are implementing this in order to protect what we consider to be the beauty of our city. So thanks for all your work. That concludes item 9D. We have no committee or commission reports. That just brings us to you, City Manager. You have anything for follow-up?
Just one item, Mayor McCoy. Our next regularly scheduled City Council meeting will be 2 weeks from tonight on the 19th of March. That will be our annual goal-setting session, which will be held this year in the Founders Room, which is in our main Cavally Theater on the second floor. And there will be a 6 p.m. start time. Will be our annual goal-setting meeting on the 19th of March at 6 p.m. Just a reminder to everyone, as we did last year, it was the first year we broadcast that meeting remotely live. We're going to be doing the same thing this year as well, so you'll be able to tune in from home. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. And with that, we adjourn. Have a wonderful night.